As of late, there's been a lot of talk about two bills within the United States of America. From Colorado, SB 26051, Age Attestation on Computing Devices, and California Assembly Bill number 1043, Age Verification Signals, Software Applications, and Online Services. It is worth noting that this one has been passed into law and will go into effect on January 1st, 2027. The Colorado bill is still up for debate and has not yet passed. Likely will, but just keep that in mind. Now, unlike a lot of legal bills, they're actually relatively short. The Colorado bill is much longer, primarily because they use a fairly big font, but this is only 9 pages long, and the California bill, that's all of it. Like, that's literally the entire thing. For all intents and purposes, these are both very, very similar bills. As I'm going to say throughout a lot of this video, I am not a lawyer, so I'm sure there are very specific legal differences between the two, but generally they are treated as pretty much the same thing. Also, I just noticed they left D colon in the name. They left D drive as part of the name for the file. You know what? Policymakers, please never change. So here's the summary of the Colorado bill. The bill requires an operating system provider to provide an accessible interface and account setup that requires an account holder to indicate the birth date of age of the user of that device, to provide a signal regarding the user's age bracket, age signal, to applications available in a covered application store, provide an application developer that requests an age signal with respect to a particular user, the technical ability to call an age signal via a reasonably consistent real-time application programming interface that identifies at a minimum the user's age bracket data, and send only the minimum amount of information necessary to comply with this bill. An operating system provider shall not share an age signal with a third party for a purpose not required by the bill. A developer shall not request more information from an operating system provider or a covered application store than is necessary to comply with the bill, or share an age signal with a third party for a purpose not required by the bill, and violating the bill obviously comes with a penalty. There's been a lot of talk about what this bill does and does not do, a lot of really good discussion breaking down exactly what is required here. So instead of talking about that, I want to talk about what is actually being done. How are projects responding to this, and what are they doing? What measures are actually being taken by some of these projects? Because this isn't just a Windows or a Mac or an iOS or an Android thing. This is going to affect Linux as well. But, oh, Linux is not an operating system. Shut up, you're stupid. Obviously, we're talking about distros, not the Linux kernel. That's just not even... Shut up. Both Linux and the BSDs are very much in the purview of these bills. And with this coming off the back of Discord's age verification mess, and the data leak they had a few months back, where the IDs that they totally were not storing were leaked because they totally weren't storing them, a lot of people are understandably on edge anytime something like this happens. And for the record, I don't like this. This is not as bad as what is happening with social media, but even in the form that this is happening, I still don't like it. One project you may have heard of is MidnightBSD. Until we have a better plan, we modified our license to exclude residents of California from using MidnightBSD for desktop use, effective January 1st, 2027. They further addressed this in a follow-up post. We've been getting a lot of questions about the license change. I'm going to try to fill a few of them. We will look at Colorado's bill that is separate from the California bill. This change is being made in reference to the actually accepted California bill. Some other change may also be necessary there. The license is likely not considered open source with the change, because what it is doing is restricting certain people from using a project. And that is, by definition, not open source. Open source is available to everyone. MidnightBSD was using a 2-clause BSD license, sometimes called the FreeBSD license, prior to this change for the whole OS. We feel the law is written quite poorly and is too vague in some areas. The authors were clearly thinking about iPhones when they wrote it. We did this change because we are struggling to figure out how to even comply with this law. Ignoring various issues here on the technical side, it's confusing with respect to package management and app startup validation requirements. Do keep in mind that MidnightBSD and the developers of this project are not lawyers. I'm not a lawyer either, but a lot of the responses being taken to this change are from people who are not lawyers, who are just trying to work out what the hell do they do? How do I comply with this? How do I make sure I do not get fined? And they also published a Google Doc on how they and other BSD operating systems can possibly try to comply with this law. Again, this is a sort of idea. Nothing here is formally set. This is sort of just throwing out ideas to say, okay, how do we actually make all of this fit together? And because the BSD is very similar, let's come up with a solution that can apply to others as well. Another one that's been going around is this calculator software, which had this commit add legal notice regarding California and Colorado bills. And this is basically what it added into the README. As a consequence of recent legislative activity in California and Colorado, California residents may no longer use DB48X, that is this software after this date, and Colorado the same. DB48X is probably an operating system under these laws. I like that. Probably an operating system. However, it does not and cannot and will not implement age verification. But this is LGPL-v3 software, so that probably runs afoul of the license. But it's such a mess, right? Again, nobody here is a lawyer. Nobody here in these smaller projects has formal legal counsel on what to do and are just doing whatever they can. Now, obviously, California has Silicon Valley, which makes it a pretty big tech hub. When we talk about Colorado, though, there is a company that most of you on Linux probably do recognize. That company is System76, makers of Cosmic and PopOS. Do keep in mind, it is not just a matter of you being in that state, it is also doing business with customers in that state as well. So you could be in, I don't know, New York or Texas or whatever, and if your customers in that area, you still have to deal with the law in that area. Now, especially System76, but even with these other projects, I've seen a lot of this sort of weird blame being directed towards them, where it's like, oh, they're at fault for complying with this law, as if System76 just has the money to eat hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars of fines, let alone some random open source project or some random BSD project. Like, that's not how the law works. You don't just get to say, oh, I'm just not going to comply with it. Nothing's going to happen. Like, you're going to get fined. Yeah, that might be fine. You might want to do that and sort of fight against the law, but I can't fault any of these projects for trying to, like, not go out of business, not collapse into oblivion. If they ever say, oh, we're going to start storing IDs for literally no reason, and then there's a big data leak of IDs, yeah, absolutely, go criticize them then. I think the way Discord handled things was absolutely stupid. But until that happens, direct your annoyance at the lawmakers who proposed and passed these bills. Anyway, rant over at least for now. Jeremy Soller, principal engineer from System76, has had something to say regarding these laws. So there was a Reddit post made. Is PopOS going to cave to California/Colorado laws requiring users to provide digital ID to use PopOS? California has already passed a law that requires PopOS to force users to identify themselves when they first set up PopOS, and Colorado, where PopOS is located, has proposed such a bill as well and is yet to vote on it. PopOS needs to simply say their product is restricted in California. If they cave, their operating system will become a spy device for the worst people running our clown show nation. Again, Why are you blaming System 76 for this? Also, completely misunderstanding the law. The law's bad, okay? This law's bad. It's not that bad. You're thinking of Discord. Here's that comment. There are serious misunderstandings about the law, both in the comments here and in the original post. The bill is short and the language is plain. It should be read in full, carefully before commenting. I know this is Reddit, but it is useless to bluster about this without understanding the scope and who is potentially liable. I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, just my personal opinion on the Californian bill. However, he does work at System 76, and they do have legal counsel that is ironing things out. We are talking internally about this bill, and the similar Colorado bill, and what that would mean for our business. Any provider of an operating system that may be used in these states would have to do the same. This includes Canonical, Elementary OS, Purism, Red Hat, SUSE, and many more. So far, I'm not aware of any public plans that any of them have made. I do know for a fact that Fedora's project leader is aware of these bills now. He wasn't a couple of days ago. He was made aware of them around the same time that everybody else was made, and presumably there is some sort of legal discussion happening with Red Hat because of this. Also, over in Manjaro land, there is some discussion happening there as well when their forum decides it wants to go and load. What's exactly going to happen with any of these projects, I'm not sure. I'm not aware of any Ubuntu discussion, but I would be very surprised if discussion isn't happening. Not aware of Elementary OS or Purism or any of the others. But I would be very surprised if behind closed doors, they're not all having some level of discussion, possibly cross-project discussion as well. Community-developed operating systems offered for free may even be required to comply or face fines, likely directed at whomever provides the OS in these states, which in this case would be System 76. If the operating system is developed internationally, but there is any business relationship with anyone in these states, including support, pre-installed hardware, or otherwise, it is likely to make someone liable. The fines for non-compliance are plainly stated in the bill and are extreme. There are a few $1,000s per case. It's not a matter of whether you feel like complying, whether you like the bill or not. That's not something that most projects can just eat and not worry about. Let alone the fact that continued non-compliance may lead you down a, much worse route as well. I personally hate this bill and the idiot lawmakers who have pushed it. However, it passed unanimously, -3 votes, which were not recorded. So everyone who voted on it voted in favor of it. In the California Assembly, which has 60 Democrat and 20 Republican members, I would expect similar bills to pass in more states, and it is possible similar regulation would be passed in Europe and elsewhere in the near future. I do not believe most free and open source software is ready to handle the ludicrous amount of legal liability this kind of legislation introduces. Recently, I talked about Debian and their GDPR enforcement team, or lack thereof GDPR enforcement team, and this is just another one of those problems which a FOSS project does not have the people to deal with. This talk of non-compliance would be fun if there was not a $7,500 fine per child who uses the OS for the OS provider performing intentional non-compliance. I can assure you all that Pop! OS and likely many other open source operating systems will do everything possible to prevent identification of users. This bill does not require any identifying information about users to be stored, outside of potentially their age fitting into one of 4 brackets. It is possible for a minimum implementation to simply not allow the operating system to run if the user says they are under 18 in the state of California. Keep in mind, however, that there are no requirements for a user to even tell the truth, and the operating system is not liable if they lie about the age. This is the most important part. The OS can do this in the laziest way possible to still comply with the bill. This is not a KYC situation, a know your customer situation, where you need to identify that user and know exactly who they are. This is basically a situation where, like, the way porn sites work, where it's like, oh, are you over 18? Yes? No. And if you say no, are you in this set of age brackets? And that's basically all you need to do to comply with it. Now, are there going to be operating systems that do a lot more than that? Oh, absolutely. But this bill has some loopholes that can be exploited, and I would expect Pop! OS and pretty much every other distro to do this in the simplest way possible. If they don't, then you can criticize them for it. I think the scariest and saddest thing about these bills are the scope they have, the lack of technological understanding demonstrated, and how much liability is shifted to OS providers, including those of free and open source operating systems. I am seriously dismayed by the nonchalant attitude of naive commentators who believe open source is somehow off the hook, just because it would be better for all of us to be off the hook. I would also clarify that the bill does not in any way require unique identification of users in order to comply with the requirements. There are many options for an OS to implement the requirements without changing the experience, privacy, and security of the vast majority of users. Now, this thread was temporarily locked, and then another one was opened in response to the locking. And again, trying to put some level of blame onto System 76 for trying to comply with the law. Was glad to see System 76 responded in this thread, but sad to see they then locked the comments so others could not respond. I've spent over $20,000 on System 76 hardware and am in the market for another box, but I now have concerns not because of System 76's stance, but the seeming desire to not hear from users. Someone else said, Fella basically gave the go-ahead to lie about your age, so that's pretty cool. Still a dogshit bill though. For now, there is no doubt the next bill after System 76 gets busy creating this surveillance apparatus for government against its users will be verification, and that requires ID, and that ID token will be passed all around the internet. Jeremy responded by saying, I unlocked that thread, at least as long as we can handle the moderation required for civil discourse. I had locked the comments on that thread specifically because it had collected many low-quality comments, and I am happy to discuss this if desired. Keep in mind, this involves legal interpretation, and we will not be taking legal advice from anyone but a lawyer at the end of the day, which is entirely reasonable. Yes, it's fine to rant about this and all that good stuff, but they're not going to take your feedback regarding compliance with a legal bill when you're not a lawyer and have no idea about the law. I can rant about this, and I'm gonna rant about this, but I don't expect them to, change what they're doing based on what I'm saying. This person here had a good point. The best thing you can do is contact your state representative and tell them you're strictly against this bill. Yes, even if you're not in a state that has a bill like this, contact your representative and let them know that you don't want a bill like this in your state. Now, regarding the whole MidnightBSD thing, when we're talking about a BSD2 clause, well, that gives you a lot more freedom in the kind of changes you can make. Pop! OS, though, has to deal with a lot of GPL stuff, and doing a similar change would be a violation of the GNU GPL license of Pop! OS. You cannot add restrictions on who can access the software. It's the same issue with those who wanted to add restrictions on military and AI usage. It is not compatible with the GPL. I'm not sure that's adequate to comply. California would need to take MidnightBSD to court to test this, and we have to hope they have a wealthy benefactor to fund their legal defense. Any license is only as strong as your legal team. I'm pretty sure they'd need to present a EULA during user account setup, and again, EULAs have had a lot of legal cases against them and EULAs not being enforceable. It's too easy to claim that the user did not see the license or agree to its terms when they installed the OS. Now, the person who made this thread has been going around quite a bit, basically just saying System 76 sucks and this is the next step to blah, 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 blah. Again, trying to just blame them. I don't think System 76 is at all at fault here. They are trying to do the best they can do with the situation they are pretty much forced into. But what do you think? What do you think of this whole situation? How worried about it are you? Are you less worried knowing it's not a situation of IDing individual users? Or do you still think it's bad? I'd love to know. So, if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really liked the video, down below, Patreon, subscribe star, you better be, over here, subscribe as well. I don't know what I'm doing with this outro. It's become a mess. Bye.